Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for attending Carolina Farm Stewardship Association's 36th Sustainable Agriculture Conference. You have joined the panel discussion, An Introduction to Building Grower-Buyer Relationships. My name is Geoff Seelen, and I am CFSA's Market Access Coordinator and will be the host for this session. You will not be able to interact verbally, but you can post your comments in the chat bar provided. I want to encourage everyone to ask questions throughout, although there will be a formal question and answer session at the end of our discussion. So don't worry, your questions will be addressed. But if they come to you, feel free to add them as we go. This session is intended to showcase a number of experts within the wholesale market channel within the Carolinas. I think that for many growers who are just starting out or maybe beginning farmers and people who raise livestock, the most familiar business model, the most kind of common sense business model that we think of when starting a small farm is a direct to consumer model. But I think that there's a great opportunity, even for very small growers, to work with wholesale buyers. So I'm very excited to be joined by our panel today, who will shed light on some of the questions that many people just getting started out or have experience but are unfamiliar with this market channel may have. So I am joined today by Lauren Horning from FreshPoint, which has locations in both the Raleigh area and Charlotte. Matt Martin, who is joining us from Freshlist, which is located in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Anthony Mirisciotta, who is from Grow Food Carolina, located in Charleston, South Carolina. So, y'all, most of my questions are going to be for all of you to answer in whatever order you feel appropriate. So to begin, the first question I have for everyone is to just tell us about your organization, where you're located, and what your role is there. Definitely feel free to tell us about how you got involved in this line of work and why you were passionate about what you do. Let's start with Lauren.
Cool beans. So good morning, everybody. I am with FreshPoint, which is North America's largest exclusively owned produce distributor. As Geoff had said, we've got two warehouses in the Carolinas, so one in Raleigh and one in Charlotte, with a distribution territory that wraps from Charleston, South Carolina, all of North Carolina, and then up to Charlottesville, Virginia. Our customers would be restaurants, universities, hospitals, corporate dining, CSA companies, retailers, anybody who's looking to buy produce. What I do is I develop the local sourcing program for the Carolinas region. So I find farmers, I crop plan with them, help with wholesale readiness, build local programs for retailers, and then assist chefs in creating local menus. And I kind of got to this space because I grew up on a small hobby farm in central Pennsylvania. Both of my parents grew up on farms. My dad was the 4-H county extension agent. And so in college, I wanted to learn more about my roots. And so I went to Argentina and worked on 2 organic farms, and then came back and worked on an urban farm in Pittsburgh. And so coming from the small side of farming, I wanted to figure out a way to get more small and mid-sized farmers with better access into the food system and connect consumers with the piece of local sourcing that I think has been missing in the grand food system at large.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Matt.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Matt. I'm from Freshlist. Freshlist is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. The work that we do, we have 2 different sections. We help wholesale farm product to restaurants, same thing, sort of institutions, corporate dining, and a couple of small grocers around our area here in Charlotte. And then we have a direct-to-consumer retail platform as well, where you can basically get your groceries delivered and get the same exact products that chefs are using in and around Charlotte, North Carolina. The way that I got involved with working with Freshlist is I was actually a chef who used to use the platform. So my background, and one of the reasons as to why I'm on this panel is I'm a classically trained chef. I've been in and out of kitchens my whole entire life. From an early age, my grandmother had a small restaurant in New York, so I, was washing dishes at 13 whenever I would go and visit my grandmother. That went into working through every single facet of the restaurant that you can think of, 4-year degree in culinary, and now since being in Charlotte, out of restaurants and now working with Freshlist, trying to make it easier for people to source local and sort of acting as that chef liaison, so I can sort of speak that language because I've come from that previous life. The role that I do here in or at Freshlist is sort of handle all of our logistics. So who's coming in, where the product is going, and then I'm also our chef coordinator. So just doing that sort of communication, making sure that people are getting their orders in, answering questions to them about what's coming up, what's going on, and trying to just be a resource for all of our chefs in and around Charlotte. Our primary distribution is I would say, in and within about an hour of Charlotte, mostly into Ballantyne, Belmont, and those sort of surrounding towns directly near us. We don't really go that far. And yeah, that's about what I do here. I just take care of the chefs.
Anthony, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Geoff, and good morning to everyone. It's great to be here today. I am Anthony Mirisciotta, the general manager at Grow Food Carolina, and we are a farmer-focused nonprofit food hub based in Charleston. This year, actually, we're celebrating 10 years of the work we've been doing. So we opened the doors in 2011. Really, at that time, not really much more than an experiment. No one knew at that point if what we were setting out to do was going to work or not. And here we are 10 years later, really celebrating the success of local farmers and local food for what we've been able to do. So now we work with about 120 farms directly throughout the state of South Carolina. And as I mentioned, everything we do is really farmer focused, from all aspects of production planning, development, outbound logistics, and ultimately allowing farmers to access markets. That is really the reason why we're here, and what we do so well to support our local farmers. Our primary markets, especially pre-pandemic, things have shifted around a little bit, which I'm sure we'll get into later on in the discussion. But we have always been focused on restaurant and chef sales. So pre-pandemic, 70% of our entire sales were directed at restaurants. We've diversified and moved around a little bit from all aspects of direct-to-consumer and box programs to food access work that we've been able to do thanks to some support. And we distribute all over the state, and even down into Savannah, up into Greenville, throughout Columbia, Charleston, of course, and up to our friends Freshlist in Charlotte. So that's a little bit about what we do. And the reason how or why I'm here, it really all came out of a curiosity of food. I was always interested in learning more about how the food arrived to me and got on my plate. So that interest really kind of led me down a path of working with farmers, spending time in the fields, spending time, on the retail floor. Ultimately, now from coast to coast, I've spent time in Pennsylvania working with farmers, New England, California, and now to the Carolinas. So really happy to be here, and looking forward to chatting more today.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, it's great to hear how you guys are so intimately involved in the growing process with the farmers that you work with. I think that's an unsung aspect of the kind of um, mid-sized wholesale distribution that you guys represent. And so, speaking of that term, wholesale, or even sometimes you hear people say mediated sales, I feel like with small farmers, there's some level of perception about doing or accessing wholesale market channels, in that you kind of have to be doing high volume or growing on a huge amount of land. Um, but before we get into kind of the semantics of all this, or rather semantically speaking, because we're focusing on these wholesale market channels today so that we're all on the same page, I'd love for one of you or all of you to kind of just briefly define what that means for the growers and producers that may be in attendance today.
I can jump in.
Sure,
I'll
thanks.
kick it off. So really, there's two types of markets for farmers: selling direct to consumer, that we'll sometimes call D2C, or selling wholesale. So direct to consumer would be selling at a farmer's market or through a CSA, direct to restaurants, and this typically earns a higher price for the farmer. Whereas selling wholesale means that the farmer's working with a third party who will sell the products to their customers. So the price is expected typically to be a little lower because the third party is going to manage the marketing, the selling, the distribution of the crops. But then that third party is also expected to buy at higher quantities than direct to consumer. So that's kind of the basic differences between the two.
Thanks.
I
Anyone
think
have anything to add? Oh, go ahead,
yeah,
Anthony.
I when you mentioned that, Jeff, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me, because we at Grow Food, we work with producers of all shapes and sizes. We don't have a size requirement. We try to really open our doors to anyone that wants to participate in being part of the local food system. So out of the 120 farmers we work with, the average size comes out to be about 60 acres. But that's farmers that are at the commercial scale of a few hundred acres or more, down to really backyard gardeners around Charleston. We work with both sides of that, and I think when you mention the word wholesale to for us or for me, what comes to mind is really consistency. uh, you know, whether it's one box or 100 boxes of something. Once you kind of enter the wholesale markets, for us, we're going to look for the same consistent pack, bunch sizes, quality standards, use of new clean boxes, and also the box size. I think that word is really what's coming to mind for me. Is that maybe you have 8 pounds of arugula, or maybe you have 8,000 pounds of arugula. It needs to look and be presented in the same size box and kind of pack size and weight, things of that nature, to really enter those wholesale channels.
Great points, Anthony. Matt, did you want to add anything?
No, they nailed it.
Awesome, great. And I think, Anthony, you're kind of on to my next question already, which is, as we talk about these two different types of market channels, the direct to consumer versus the wholesale market channel, and all of kind of like the mystery involved in the latter form, especially when it comes to smaller growers. What advice would you guys give folks who are interested in growing their business through wholesale market channels, which are the businesses that obviously you represent, but don't have the experience with these kinds of sales? So what kind of opportunities are they opening themselves up to by exploring relationships with buyers like yourselves? Matt, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that we can give, and I think all of us will agree upon, is that like we exist to support our farmers. We are here to make things easier for you. And although it may seem intimidating, whether or not you're talking to a business our size or a FreshPoint size, it doesn't matter. Like the faces that you're seeing right now care about the things that you're doing, and we care about you as humans, and we want to see you succeed. So no question that hasn't been asked can be answered. So if there's something that you don't understand, or if there's something that you don't know, after we have this internal and initial conversation, just asking and being, over asking and making sure that you're doing things the right way, because that level of communication will only help the people who you're seeing right now serve you better. So when it comes to our size over here at Freshlist, we do handle, just as Anthony was saying, a lot of smaller farms, and we handle a couple of larger size farms as well. And the one thing that it all comes back to is, as Anthony was saying, consistency. And then the biggest thing is just communication. So if you're selling us arugula for the first time, and you know that it's going to be going through to a chef, having that conversation of, is it need to be in a box for your business? Can it be in a 2-pound plastic bag? Is that going to be okay? If it's going out to end consumer in a retail channel, does it need to be in a compostable clamshell? Does it need to be, what vessel, what sizes, what pack size? Just as Anthony was saying, is going to be the biggest things in sort of really making sure and almost over explaining what you're going to do when you're first initially working with us. It's really hard in the digital age to communicate effectively, just because sometimes you can't understand tone through a text message, or you might not be able to understand the way that somebody's saying something through an email. So just over clarifying and really being, focused on making sure that we both have a complete understanding, so that when a large order of something or a small order of something shows up at the back door, it's exactly what we both anticipated, so that we can, do the things that you're asking of us most effectively as well.
And I see that's those are great points, Matt, and definitely the communication piece. Over communication is better than the lack of communication. And just like Matt said, we are here to help, and want to be there from the first phone call until the time the box is sold out the door. But I think, and as I was thinking this, I see Mike's comment or question in the chat, which what I'm about to say might be a little bit harder for protein producers, but for the diversified or small row crop vegetable producers we work with, it's not always going to be the case that everything works. It's not if you think that I really want to grow butternut for wholesale markets, that might not always be the best fit. There might not be a market demand for it. The price points might not align. So it's not that everything is always going to work, but what we want to try to do and support the grower in is finding what does work. We promote and support diversification of markets with all of our farmers. So we don't want to be the only game in town. And I think that's really what provides the strength and support to farmers, is finding what works for your local restaurants or your markets down the road. And then also finding what works for Grow Food or Freshlist or FreshPoint on the wholesale market channels. And it's kind of that balance is what really makes you, a successful or sustainable farmer. So kind of, to Mike's comment is, really kind of promoting that diversification and finding what works. It's not always going to be the best fit, or maybe it doesn't work at all to work with a wholesale market food hub channel. But, I think just trying it, and then also, these trials, for us at least, sometimes they take 1, 2, 3 years before you actually find that product, that market, or that commodity that is going to be successful for you. So taking the time to do that as well.
And I'll kind of piggyback. Anthony, I think you bring up a really great point about what is the buyer looking for, getting to know your buyer. So there can be a back and forth conversation on what are they seeing, what's their perspective, what are customers talking about, because the buyer can at times be more customer facing. And so if you're considering growing tomatoes, talking with the buyer about varietals and what are higher price point varieties. Are customers interested in green zebra tomatoes, or do they want a red slicer? Some of that feedback can really align. I actually talked with a grower yesterday who she's thinking about going wholesale, not really sure. And one thing that she had talked about was she really wanted to grow tomatoes, but she also was thinking about flowers. And we had a customer come in and really wanted lavender wands this past year. So we talked about that, and she loves to grow lavender and has some already on her property. So having that back and forth and being open to including a buyer in the business plan and what the future of the farm looks like can build those steps together towards a more sustainable vision, because that's the ultimate goal. How can we as the buyers help make your farm long-term more sustainable?
And also helping, Lauren, that's a great point. Helping with innovation, season to season, to keep your kind of hand in the market and maybe try a value added product, or if you've been growing tomatoes for 5 years and all of a sudden the sales aren't what they once were, what could you do for packaging? What could you do for alternate markets? Different varietals, things like that kind of keeps it fresh and fun and keeps markets excited. That's something that we really enjoy doing, and it kind of goes back to that communication and season to season kind of keeping those lines open between each other, and diversifying and innovating to really boost those sales and keep things rolling.
Yeah, and Matt, what do you think about opportunities in the wholesale market channel that farmers might be missing, when the focus is so heavily on direct to consumer models, especially in a market garden context?
I think one of the biggest things is their time resource management personally. So when you're capable to have a product that's saleable through a wholesale channel, if I can do, or any of our companies can help you with the logistics and the delivery and doing all of those little things that can take you away from the farm and the work that you're doing, that's one of the even larger benefits of working through that wholesale channel. We have a lot of small farms that do all of their own delivery, and little by little we'll see, now we're handling the majority of their restaurant deliveries. And although that farmer to chef contact is very beneficial, we at Freshlist, I talk about all of the farmers when I'm out on deliveries myself, and it's almost easier for me to sell somebody else's thing than it would be for them to come to you and kind of sell your own thing. Like when I walk in, I'm like, do you see these marigolds? These look crazy, which is a benefit. But I think that the benefit for the farmer is that once you find a wholesale channel where you can bring a large quantity of your product, or what is large in reference to your size farm, it can free up a lot of that time. It can free up, costs of, having a driver and a vehicle, gas and, wear and tear on a vehicle and all of those things. So I think once you're capable of getting that wholesale contact, or working with a size company like any of us, it's going to get you back on the farm doing the things that, you're better at doing, when you have somebody like us handling logistics.
Yeah, I mean, Mike's question here in the chat is very relevant to this, because essentially what we're talking about is, the amount of time and labor that a farmer, especially the farmer who is running and supporting the operation, the amount of time that they spend having to market their own products, especially to buyers like chefs in particular, who can be a little bit either non-committal or very, very, very particular about the things that they want to buy that are not necessarily going to fully support the farms themselves. So it sounds like what you're saying is that if you can find someone else to kind of manage the marketing and distribution of your product, that can open up opportunities that you might not have if you were doing it on your own, even though the trade-off is of course going to be some of that price point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that's awesome. And Mike, I hope that that we answered your question, and I'm sure that we'll get back to it later in the session. So, and I think that some of the comments that you guys have made about you know guiding farmers through what it takes to get into this market channel um, kind of brings up this big looming question that I always get from people, which is kind of about certifications and what it takes, because it is a bigger component in many cases that selling to a wholesale buyer is going to require more types of certifications, and that can feel kind of scary because there's obviously concerns of liability and food safety. And obviously, if you have products that have certifications like organic, et cetera, those can fetch higher prices. They're potentially more attractive for you to purchase. But can you guys kind of just take a moment to kind of demystify the different types of requirements or certifications that farmers might need, not necessarily for you specifically, but just in general, what are farmers facing, and why would it be attractive for them to perhaps invest more of their time and even capital in pursuing some of those certifications?
So for us, I think an easy way to look at it is we at Grow Food, we don't have any certification requirements at this time. That might be changing in the future. It's kind of what I've been saying for a very long time around that. But again, it comes through communication, and it's really with the communication that we would have with farmer partners or new farmers is the certifications that you want to pursue or you may pursue in the future. It really depends on what markets you want to access. For us, the certifications that we would require would just be the requirement would be coming from the customers themselves through us back to the farmer. So we can, of course, sell product without certification, but if it gets to a certain level of volume where we have to reach additional markets that are requiring certain certifications, those would then be put on the grower to kind of reach that level of sales and marketability. There's any different retail chain from Harris Teeter to Food Lion or Whole Foods is kind of going to have their own level of requirements when it comes to certifications. We at Grow Food, going back to the majority of our sales being going towards restaurants, we don't have to, get involved in the weeds of those certifications so much, but we do also sell into those markets, and there are requirements for growers that are going to access those markets through Grow Food.
I'll jump in. For us, we're a little different in that we do ask growers have what's called the harmonized gap or the H gap, which is the second level of the gap audit. So originally it started as the USDA gap, and when FSMA came out, Food Safety Modernization Act, USDA and FDA got together and created the harmonized gap. So basically, harmonized gap looks at water testing. If there are animals coming onto your property, are you harvesting within that area? Do you have a food safety plan? So there's some documentation that comes with it, and there is a cost associated. I would say for farmers that are considering HGAP or just the GAP audit in general, CFSA has awesome food safety coordinators. We work really closely with Kim Butts and Chloe Johnson, and they are a huge resource in connecting farmers with funds that are available. So North Carolina Department of Ag and South Carolina Department of Ag have cost share opportunities for farmers within their first 3 years of getting GAP certified. And both Kim and Chloe work closely with the state on getting farmers those funds. They'll come out, they'll do a free mock audit, they answer questions. So for anyone who's wanting to get a GAP audit or just wanting to think it through, I would say definitely reach out to them because they are incredible resources. And beyond that, I would say that would be our main requirement is the HGAP. We do ask farmers to have insurance, but farmers can come to us with any level of insurance. We have an insurance supplement program that will supplement a farmer's insurance up to a 2 million, 4 million policy. So we've got farmers that we work with about 115 farmers in the Carolinas, smallest farmer being about an acre. And so farmers may only want to have a farmer's comprehensive policy that is a lower liability than a full general liability policy, and that's fine. What we'll do is we supplement it quarterly. We do those reports up to our insurance company, which allows us to sell products from very, very small farms, 1 or 2 cases, to larger retailers or larger institutions. So that's kind of our way that we can help be the bridge into getting larger access.
Yeah, thanks for the shout out, Lauren. That's great. We really appreciate it. And just so everyone knows, if you are a member of CFSA, which you can get for as low as $20 a year, those services are completely free. It's part of our farm services department, and I can echo everything that Lauren said in that both Kim and Chloe are excellent at what they do, and they will walk you through every step of that process. So, Matt, what about you guys? What are Freshlist's certifications, and why do you require them?
Yeah, so on our end, we are kind of in the same model as Anthony. The majority of our sales are going to be going to the sort of restaurant establishment. So we don't require any certificate, like GAP certificate. We do work with farmers that have them, but it's not a requirement. The one piece that we do require is a liability insurance on the farmer. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm very kind of like out of that loop. So I'm unsure of what level or what threshold that has to be. So I apologize for that. But that is limited liability insurance on the farmer side is the one certificate. And then we'll just highlight the people that do have them. And we have sort of an internal food and safety policy in place where our food and safety coordinator, Gigi, will have a form that a new farmer will fill out to make sure that everything seems like they have everything in a row. But I'm very unsure of what's on that, to tell you the truth.
That's okay. I think a lot of us don't know that much about insurance. So that's fine. What I can say about insurance policies is that regardless of the level, they're fairly affordable. I'm pretty sure that you can get a $1 million product liability policy from somewhere like Farm Bureau for like less than $200 a year, maybe even less than $150 a year. So, I mean, it's just like having, life insurance, except that it's probably more practical for you in terms of like what you are trying to do in the context of farming and this conversation more specifically. So, thanks guys. I appreciate that. And I really love how you all in particular are so focused on providing customer service to people who uh, you're buying from. Normally, we associate with, you know, some kind of we think about customer service like going to the store and returning DVDs that don't work or whatever. But I love how you guys recruit new and inexperienced growers and help them walk through all the different hoops that they might run into. I just think it's excellent. But another thing that I come across a lot in my work, because I work directly with farmers as part of the farm services team at CFSA to help people specifically with questions of market access. And a lot of people ask me, and it's a great question, and it has many answers and many different ways of thinking about it. Is how do I know what price to sell to wholesale buyers? Can you guys kind of talk through what that process looks like for you when you're setting prices with growers or producers, and what can farmers do to get the best value for their products? Are there opportunities to negotiate with buyers when talking about price?
I'll kick off really quick just because we have a couple of different avenues. Like we were saying, that wholesale channel directly to restaurants, and then we also have a retail platform. So what our farm purchaser, Erin Bradley, will do, she does all of our products procurement. And when she's working with the farm, they will tell her the price that they need for an item. And then depending on whether or not we are capable of applying, markups to it, it might go to wholesale, or since we do have a retail channel where things can get marked up more, depending on the size of farm, it might go into that avenue. So because we have two different avenues where things can be sold, we have an ability to sort of work with the farmer, but also let them know, like, hey, that product might be something that we're unable because of the price to sell on wholesale, but we can put it on our retail, but our retail business is a lot smaller than our wholesale business. So just as Lauren and Anthony have kind of said the whole entire time, sort of parameters, but I think always understanding from the farm perspective what you want, what you need, what you want, and then lowest that you're capable of selling a product for, and obviously not leading with that, but just understanding and having the comfortability and the courage to say, like, hey, I can't do it, I'm going to go to another avenue, or I'm going to try direct to consumer or something like that myself with this particular product. Having that open dialogue and that open communication, again, one thing that we'll harp on a lot throughout this whole talk, I'm sure, just to be upright and forward with your buyer, like, that's too low, I can't do that, and that's okay.
Yeah, and for us at Grow Food, those conversations start even before the seed is purchased by the farmer. Right now, going into the end of the year, we're having production planning and price conversations about what farmers might put in the ground and harvest out of the ground next spring and summer. So again, can't say it enough, but the communication piece is huge. And getting to that point of what works, it's always a conversation of, like, hey, if I plant shishito peppers and put them in a clamshell versus a bulk 10-pound case, what is the price going to be? What's the average price going to be? Working with the farmer to find out what they need to make it work, and getting to that point of really mutual understanding. There's everything isn't going to work, but finding what does work for both the farmer, for the food hub, and for the markets. And for us also at Grow Food, a lot of the pricing comes now from our history of sales over the past 10 years. We're able to reference through the seasons. We could have conversations with our buyers, from the restaurant to the retail, to see kind of what they're thinking, what the markets could withstand, when it comes to pricing. We're going to do everything we can within each season to get the highest return to the grower. So if we're seeing, a smaller harvest coming off of the peach trees or whatever it is, we have that ability to flex the pricing based off of kind of the seasonality, our understanding of what the harvest is going to look like, if there's weather disruptions, other disruptions that might affect prices. Again, those are kind of happening in the moment each season, but the conversation starts months and months in advance before that product gets to us.
And we do kind of a hybrid, I would say, of what Anthony and Matt have talked about. We group products into two categories. We've got core crops, which would be your squash and zucchini and cucumbers, melons, and then specialty crops, which would be wasabi radishes and patty pan squash, unique varieties of kale like spigarello kale. So when we look at what we're bringing in, we're year-round bringing in and stocking commodities from all over the United States. So a lot of those prices are based off of USDA terminal market pricing, which can be found online. And so our buyers throughout the United States will compare USDA terminal market pricing and look and figure out where's the national market on these commodities. And one way we can drive volume to, I would say, more mid-sized farms is to switch out what we're stocking to local farmers. Or we have retail contracts where we provide local produce only to a couple corporate retailers. And so then we can set those contracts ahead of time, really this time of year is when those are being built. So then we can crop plan with farmers at the beginning, really now until about the second week of January, to say, this is what's in those corporate retail contracts. Are you able to work with these prices? If you are, great. If not, no worries. We can either look at it then as a specialty commodity that we aren't stocking, or if we have enough customers that are interested in it, we'll bring products into stock and base it off of the pricing that the farmer needs. More often than not, I would say we're getting questions from farmers on what would be a good case price, whether it's a specialty or a core commodity. Some farmers just want to move volume, and some farmers only want to move 1 or 2 cases, and they want to make sure they're getting the best for that case. So we'll look at what's being charged on the Los Angeles farmers market, what's in the Santa Monica farmers market for specialty commodities, and then how do we compare those across to make sure local farmers are getting both a premium as well as an extra premium for freight. So we'll often tell farmers if they're too low on a price, we can see that in pricing history back 2 years as well as in other FreshPoint locations. And we can say, hey, come up $4 or $5 on your price, because in other markets and here in North Carolina, you can be making more depending on the weather or just where the general trend is for that year. And that back and forth conversation is always with the end question of, is this comfortable for you as the farmer? Because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the farmer is still going to be a successful farmer at the end of that year. And so pricing is always the final say, comes down to what works for the farmer.
Thanks, guys. And what I can add to that as a former grower myself, from the perspective of the farmer, is that you really need to understand the value of the product that you're trying to sell. And it requires a lot of time and energy on the farm, tracking the value around as you go through each stage of production, from seeding to cultivation to harvesting to post-harvest handling. And especially the smaller you are, because the larger a farm gets, the less efficient it has to be to generate a profit. So those of us who are running smaller market gardens, we do anticipate to generate the most value per acre for what we're growing. So it's really important for you to understand the costs that go into producing all of your products, so that when you go to a buyer, you can confidently say, this is the value of my crop, this is what it costs me to produce, and this is what I need to get from a buyer to make a profit. And that takes time. A great resource that I can think of right now is The Lean Farm by Ben Hartman. I think that if you're out there running a small farm or a market garden and you haven't read it, and honestly, big farmers too. I mean, it's a great book. It helps you track value around the farm, and it's just a great philosophy to kind of keep in mind, even if you're not applying it as intensely as he recommends. So thank you guys for that insight from what it's like on your end. Speaking of price, I'm also wondering, it's very intuitive how to collect payments when you're doing a farmer's market or doing a CSA. Those things are fairly straightforward. How does payment change when you're dealing with a third party? Could you guys illuminate that for us?
Do you guys mind if I address Mike's question really quick?
Yeah, no, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Especially since you're a former chef, that'd be great.
Yeah. I just feel like I have some good insight really quick just because of my background, and I just want to make sure that Mike gets taken care of. Mike, you had 2 questions. One of them that you put up at 10:18. I'm going to talk about that first really quick. One of the better things that I think is very important for you to do is finding out what it is that's not only unique about you, the relationships that you have, and the brand that you have with the livestock that you're raising, and then being in that heavy communication with a restaurant chef, if that's who you're selling to, or if you're selling to your wholesale market, letting them know, hey, I have, these cows, they're going to be coming up at this time. This is when I will have, these certain cuts, and explaining not only what certain cuts that you're going to have, but also internally yourself having the knowledge of what an end consumer, whether it's a retail home purchaser or a restaurant, would be able to do with those cuts. So you really have to be the master not only of raising this product, but also being able to give somebody the vision of what they can do with those more, I don't want to call them unpopular cuts, but not readily sought after when they're at a market, right? And you say, you can, that education component can happen to your, like you're saying, leaves no good cuts for our consumers. When somebody is around you, the farmer who raised this product, if you're explaining to them, how to take a flanken steak, right? That short rib that's cut a little bit different, and cook it at home and make it delicious. And if you're, really excited about that and passionate about it, like, people are going to feel that, and then they're going to get excited about it. So the one thing that I would say to you is just making sure that you really understand what you can do with all of these components, so that you can explain it as if you were telling a third grader how to tie their shoes. Like, it needs to be really quick and efficient and communicated very well so people get excited about it. If the price point doesn't allow for you to sell either to the wholesale channel or to direct to a restaurant, I would ask you to look for establishments that have that higher plate cost. So really looking at the restaurants that are around you or within your delivery area to see who is doing, I don't want to say fine dining, but more expensive, more intentional sourcing when it comes to the food that they're serving. Because it might not be that, it might just be that you haven't gone to the right spot to explain the value that you can give to them. And they might not need to be getting beef from you throughout that whole entire year. It could be a special, or it can be a talking point for an in establishment, whether it's a restaurant or a wholesale purchaser. We have this now. The reason that we have this beef now is because, these beef are, being put into production, and this is the moment that we have them. And then that gives, your wholesale buyer or the restaurant that you're going to sell to time to get people excited about it and to learn about it. We have a couple of different very small beef farms that we work with, and on our wholesale and our retail platform, we are able to educate about why these animals are treated differently, how they're processed differently, and the size of the farm, to really make people understand why the price point might be a little bit higher on them.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was awesome. Did you feel like you got to answer both of Mike's questions?
I hope.
I'm sure he'll pipe up if there are some lingering concerns. But speaking of talking about questions from the audience, I think George's question is great, and I think we could all answer it. So George is asking, concern that he has is the what if an anticipated crop fails. You've planned with a buyer potentially. And his example here is a beautiful pumpkin patch that he had in early August, which got totally decimated by squash bugs and was gone by Labor Day. In a case like that, would I lose both the crop and owe the wholesale buyer something?
I'm going to jump in on that because I actually had a conversation with that yesterday with the farmer. It really depends on your buyer, and it is very important to ask that question to your buyer. So, for example, I recently had a peach farmer come to me about yesterday and was asked, he had lost his wholesale buyer that was buying his peaches for the past 2 years because of the late frost that we've had on peaches. And so he wasn't able to provide the peaches that the buyer had asked. This is an extremely large buyer. And so the buyer decided to stop working with him. Now he came to us and said, am I able to sell to you? And I said, definitely, of course, we'd love to work with you. He's on about 100 acres with peaches near Charlotte. And so it's an easy answer for us because we just really want to work with the farmers and help them. And I think that's really what it comes down to is asking that question of your buyer. For some buyers, like very large retailers, they may not be as focused on expanding relationships with farmers. So I think that's extremely important. George, as you're figuring out customers for your products, ask that question, because for us, the answer is yes, we definitely want to keep working with you, because at the end of the day, the goal is to make you a more successful and sustainable farmer. So next year, potentially we might, if you want to explore other crops, if you still want to grow pumpkins, if we'll have that conversation to figure out what works for you. And I think Matt and Anthony and other customers, buyers who are focused on helping the grower, that's going to be their answer. But it's really important, just so you at the end of the day know what you're getting into. That's a great question to ask.
Yeah, we at Grow Food, and throughout my experience, I've never asked for the grower to compensate after a crop loss for whatever reason or another. I even think in some of the larger contracts where a grower might be held accountable, there's always like this act of God clause, pending weather and things like that. Especially here in the Carolinas and in Charleston, when it comes to hurricane season, we experience, and the farmers experience, fall crop loss quite a bit due to storms and flooding and things of that nature. We at Grow Food, we would never hold any of the growers we work with accountable, and would just continue to work with them to get through it together. And you just kind of have to tie up your shoes and look forward to the next season.
Yeah, and thank you guys for getting into the chat proactively, and I welcome everyone to continue to ask questions throughout, because we've got three great panelists here. I've got a little bit of insight to offer myself, and we would love to hear more from people like Mike and George and whoever else is in attendance. So thanks everyone. Matt, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No. So with our model, the way that we handle availability is, week by week with the restaurants. So if there's a failure, obviously we'll be in that communication. Or even if there's a shortage, sometimes because of the way that our model works, we put out a list. People purchase off that list, and sometimes people don't have the amount. Right now on our platform, we don't have a way to address whether or not there's high, medium, or low availability. So sometimes we'll oversell product, which I know is a little bit different than this certain particular situation. But then, it just goes back to communicating with, whether it be the restaurant or the end consumer, this has happened, this is what's gone on, so you're not going to get that product. But we don't enter any, from my understanding, we don't have, we would never ask a farmer to have to pay out a contract or something like that we might have with them. Like, obviously we know things happen, and we know how hard it can be.
Awesome. And Mike, I will make sure that you and Matt get connected. And of course, if it's okay with everyone on the panel, if it's all right to share contact information for you guys, I will make sure that we provide that near the end of the discussion, so everyone has personal, not personal, but work contact for everyone who's here today, including myself. Yeah, so I feel like we're kind of getting back to my original question, which had to do with payments and transactions. So what's going to change for growers when they work with a third party? What can they anticipate because they're, a lot of the questions come from concerns about cash flow and making sure that you're always getting paid. So what's going to change? What should you be prepared for? What does that look like with you guys?
So I think the big, providing the bigger picture, and kind of going back to the reason why Grow Food is here, and since the beginning, really providing that market access. We now have nearly 500 different customers and single customer locations that we have access to. So again, from Greenville to Savannah to Charlotte, the grower's product ends up here in our warehouse in Charleston, and this is the only place that the grower needs to get it. whether that's coming on the back of their truck or working in collaboration with us to get it here. It's a single drop-off point, and then that product has the ability to access, these 500 different customers in all of these different metro and regional areas. So that's kind of the strength of a food hub and what works so well for the farmers. And then also, it's one phone call. They call us, let us know what they have, one drop-off location, and then they're also getting one check, one consolidated check returned to them for all of those sales, whether it's one box or 100 boxes. They're going to receive one consolidated payment. I think going back to communication, every food hub is different, and how quickly the money is going to be turned around and back to the farmer. So I think understanding those terms is really important. It might be 7 days, it might be, 64 days. So you really have to understand, when you should be expecting payment, and then understanding, kind of the margin and what the food hub or distribution partner is going to take. We at Grow Food have always operated under the very transparent model of 80% of the sale price is going to be returned to the grower. So really, whether it was a $10 case or a $40 case, 80% of that is going to come back to the grower. And again, we always push to get the growers as much of the return as possible, kind of looking at seasonality and markets and availability. And definitely, ultimately, our goal is to get that money back in the hands of the farmer as soon as possible once that product is sold.
On our end, the way that we've done things up until almost like 2 weeks ago is every time a farm would drop off, we were handing out payments to the farmer. We're very recently just transitioning over to either 7 or 15-day terms internally for our business. And that's just for, the purposes of like keeping accounting a little bit easier. One of the more difficult things when it came to handling checks and payments right as a farmer was delivering on our end is sometimes things change. Sometimes invoices don't match up, and sometimes you're in the middle of like receiving and checking things in. So it's really hard to be like thoroughly going through everything while you're also trying to be as food safe as possible to get things to where it needs to be and refrigerated as quickly as you need to be. So having that term also, gives everybody sort of time to make sure that what I brought to you is actually reflected on the invoice. The check payment can be written at a separate time to make sure that all of those things are being handled and taken care of for accounting, both for the farmer and for the distribution or wholesale partner. But I think, just as Anthony is saying, it definitely depends on sort of the size and the business model of each establishment that you might be working with, and just figuring out what that situation is. Before you start selling to somebody, having that that initial conversation, and then making sure that can align with what you're expecting on the farm so that you can handle, your cash flow personally.
I think one thing we've seen and gotten requests from farmers is to have a paper trail. And I think farmers who have been in wholesale in their second or third year tend to see the importance of that and making sure that they know where money's coming from, what's the cash exchange, where's it going. So I would suggest, especially for farmers getting into it, to make sure that if you're getting paid by a check, if you're getting paid by direct deposit, make sure to keep a good ledger of how and where the cash is coming from, because you're going to want that at the end of the year. And you may be able to reach back out to your wholesaler or to your customers to figure out what all those transactions looked like. Some folks, like we'll have farmers reach out and say, can you run a report for all of the purchase orders that you sent me for this calendar year? We'll say, yes, these are the prices, and they've got it. That can be difficult though if you're down to tax time and you're crunching and you're trying to get everything together. So I think keeping record of that throughout the year is really important. We pay by 14 to 21 days with direct deposit, and that'll come through into your bank account. You'll get a receipt of remittance that comes through in your email. And then that's kind of helps with the paper tracking.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys elaborating on all the different iterations of payment. And what I would add to that is, even if you're not getting cash on delivery as a grower, I think the advantage here that's implied is that you're making more predictable and consistent sales. So while you may go to a farmer's market on a weekend and not really know what you're going to return with, especially to Anthony's point about guaranteeing a certain rate of return, I think that can really help growers sleep at night. They know that, they have this relationship that's working, and as long as production continues at the rate that they've kind of agreed upon, you're going to keep seeing those returns over a period of time. Um, just checking the chat. Again, feel free to add your questions to the chat as we go through this conversation. But I've got plenty more questions for our panelists. So I was kind of wondering, it would be interesting to hear some anecdotes from you all about, you know, initially, some relationships that didn't work out and what the reasons were behind that. Maybe as an example for the audience, so they can know like what to avoid when they're trying to build a relationship with a buyer. And then also it would be great to contrast that with some success stories, especially people maybe who hadn't experienced successful uh, access to the wholesale market channel that you guys helped grow yourselves that are currently still working with y'all.
I love stories. I'll jump in on this one if that's all right, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren.
I'll start with the more difficult first, because it's for us. I feel like it's very rare that we have a stumbling block with farmers. We work with a lot of farmers and artisans, but it is definitely not commonplace to have big issues that turn into something that kind of blows up. That's a rarity for sure. Um, I would say the one that sticks out to me happened a few years ago. A farmer called and said he had some turnips with tops that he needed help moving. He had a bumper crop. It was a small farm. He only had about 20 extra cases. And so he had asked if we could help out, and we said yes. So we found a chef who was interested in the 20 turnips, but the chef specifically wanted the tops as well. And the farmer confirmed, yep, we've got tops, we're good to go. The chef had an event that weekend that he was going to be using both the root and the greens. And so we picked up the order at the farm, but when we got there, the driver called our buyers because all of the greens had been eaten through, and there were just skeletons, brown skeletons of what should have been greens, but they weren't. And there was some bug damage on the roots as well. And so the driver called and we got pictures, and it was not good quality. The bug damage in the boxes was so much that we wouldn't have even been able to bring it into stock because the bugs were still alive and moving, and they could spread with everything else that was in our warehouse. So we called and talked with the farmer. The farmer was unhappy. He thought that the product was okay. And so we said, this won't work for us. Let us know if you have other crop or if you can clean out these cases and then keep us posted. So about a week later, the farmer called again and said that he had more turnips with tops, and this time he was going to deliver. And so he delivered, and we don't know if it was the same product or if it was a different product, but it was the same thing. There were bugs in all the cases and substantial bug presence. As soon as you opened the case, it was filled with bugs flying out at you and crawling over the turnips. And then the greens were also skeletal greens as well. So we talked to the farmer and said, this is really a communication piece that this doesn't work. And it's always an extremely difficult and uncomfortable conversation to have that with a farmer and kind of talk about why this doesn't work. And we hope that the farmer sees as you walk through like food safety and why doesn't this work, and we try to be as detailed as possible. But at the end of the day, that was just a relationship that didn't really work out, which was very difficult. And again, it's hard to have those conversations. But at the end of the day, we also can't ship that to a customer because then the customer will come back and as a large distributor, often say that it's the distributor's fault and we should have caught it on QA. So it gets very difficult. And we, at the end of the day, just want to make sure that we're promoting the farm in the best light that they can be promoted in. And that one was certainly a difficult scene to work through. But I'm going to counter that with a happy story because we've been working with a small, very small dairy farmer out in Alamance County since 2017. And this farmer has about 60 head of cows, has struggled for years with markets and pricing on milk. In 2008, he got a grant and was able to start bottling on the farm, which was awesome. But he's been delivering and trying to do everything himself. He's in his 60s and was just really struggling. So when the pandemic hit, this farmer was at risk of losing his farm and really hit a breaking point where he wasn't sure what to do. And so we started talking with universities and trying to find sales. And eventually we found a university who was interested, and we started buying much more milk. Originally, 2017, 2018, we were looking at 2 to 3 cases a week, very small volume. We just couldn't get customer interest. Then when we went into August of 2020, we started increasing those POs substantially. So a year eclipses. In August of 2021, the farmer came to us and said that he had run out of cold storage because our POs had gotten so large. And so we searched to find a reefer unit and found a 45-foot refrigerated trailer in Cisco, Atlanta. And we were able to donate that trailer to the farmer, which quadrupled their cold storage. So now the farmer has applied for a yogurt grant. He has big plans to be able to expand, and our POs, he's filling milk orders that are larger than he's ever filled. So for farmers that really want it and really believe in the mission of the farm, I would say let people know how we can help if it's possible. Buyers want to help, there are customers that want to help. And I think stories like that, it just shows the potential of the food system and how all of us working together can make a dream a reality.
Thanks for that, Lauren. And before we go into failures and successes with Matt and Anthony, I definitely want to address Marvin's question because I think it's a great question. Just so you all know, panelists, Marvin is a beef cattle producer, and correct me if I'm wrong, Marvin, but I believe you are starting your own processing facility in North Carolina. Is that correct? But yeah, so he's asking about advice for farmers in the context of accountability and traceability.
I talked a lot, so somebody else take this.
I mean, if you've got something, Lauren, go ahead. But yeah, what do you guys think?
I was going to defer to Matt because of the protein aspect of Marvin's question and perspective, but I'm happy to jump in if you don't have anything, Matt.
I think that I don't understand the accountability question completely. So if there's a way to elaborate on what Marvin is looking for advice, I'm more than happy to jump in.
Yeah, I guess the way that I see it is maybe talking about maybe quality standards, or just like that, maybe speaking to that communication issue that Lauren was kind of speaking to in the case of the turnip greens. But yeah, Marvin, if you want to kind of clarify your question, we'll definitely get back to it. So yeah, Anthony, tell us about some failures and successes that you've had with new or inexperienced growers.
Yeah, that Lauren had such a good story there, and a horrific story with the insects. But of course, we've all seen that. I think it's really, we have seen, and it always happens where there's certain programs that might fail, rather than trying to focus on the grower or the relationship there. But we have had pretty significant programs over the past few years where there's been consistent production and planning, And then all of a sudden you get into the one season or the 1 year where there's not really much demand for that product. So I think that really shows kind of how fluid the markets are, and how things change throughout the season, and really trying to just grow and develop together to get out of things like that. There's always going to be, just with anything in life, but especially food production and how personal it all is for us, especially farmers putting in the time to grow all of this great food for us. There's going to be, these kind of missed lines of communication and understanding, mostly of, when somebody harvests cantaloupe, or how cured an onion is, or a hard squash, or things like that, where it's like, upon arrival, I could tell them that, it would have been really great if this melon just hung out on the vine a little bit longer. And the farmer's perspective would tell me that, no, this fruit's good. It was a good time to harvest it. With produce and with food, there's always going to be those challenges. And again, just kind of going back to communication, relationships, getting through them together, building trust and transparency around the food system that we're both playing such a significant role in. And the success of it all is, for the farmer, being as involved as you want to be, and understanding the markets, where that product is going, what you can do to diversify the product, and make it more desirable, or more marketable to different outlets. Kind of what I said earlier is there's a lot of the success has been just around adding value to the product. Something as simple as putting peppers in a clamshell, putting tomatoes in a clamshell, as well as offering a bulk pack and maybe even a bags pack. There's all these ways to increase sales with just offering one single commodity. And we've seen a lot of success, especially on the retail side, with things like that, where growers are able to double their revenue, double their production on a single commodity, just by offering another SKU, another value added product.
Awesome. And before I let you answer, Matt, I just wanted to make a comment, which is, and I'll preface this by saying, I'm in no way partial to a particular market channel. All the farmers that I work with, I try to help them understand that there are obvious, objective business reasons for going into different types of sales, whether it be wholesale or direct to consumer. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's also a personal choice and a lifestyle choice. And the farmers market is hallowed ground for many farmers, and I'm definitely not opposed to farmers markets at all. But what I do want to offer is just to kind of reflect on what a lot of our panelists are saying, is that this is all that they do. This is how they make their livelihood. They spend all of their time working with growers, and especially based on what Anthony just said, I'm realizing again that you're going to get a certain type of access to feedback that you might not get with your patrons at a farmer's market or the members of your CSA, because while they might be passionate about the products that you are growing, they might not be experts in their production, whereas our panelists here are, and they can definitely help steward you through production crises. So yeah, I just think that that's awesome, guys, and I really think that that's a unique aspect, especially within the markets that you guys are currently involved in. So Matt, go ahead and tell us about some failures and successes that you've seen at Freshlist.
Yeah, one thing quickly before on that communication aspect, with what Lauren and what Anthony is saying, we'll have people that will get that sort of bug issue, right, with arugula or another hardy green like that. And if they don't tell us, and then it comes through our back door, and we're like, hey, this doesn't meet quality standards, then there's not really other things that we can do then. But if they bring that up to us before it's delivered, and they tell Aaron, like, hey, this does have some holes in it. It looks like this. They might send a photo, and then Aaron goes, okay, well, I can't sell that as regular retail arugula, because a home consumer might think that that's not good, but she can sell it as processing or pesto arugula, where if we know the end application that the restaurant might be doing with it, then we can find a way to still try and sell it so that you're not losing out completely on that sale. That pesto arugula situation, or a cooking apple situation, maybe when an apple goes to being from a grade A to a grade B, that line of communication just lets that in-person understand what they're going to be receiving. So when we do bring it to a restaurant and it is a lower grade quality, they're like, yeah, that's fine. I'm using these tomatoes to make ketchup. It doesn't matter that there's a couple of bruises or I'm making barbecue sauce out of them. So all of that going back and all of that just to say, like, understanding what your channels are going to do with your product and who they might be selling to better sell something. If it is, a low quality, or if there were an issue with the pest that you weren't, ready to handle, that can be very beneficial. One of the biggest issue that we see on our end is the way that our model works. All of our product comes in on one day and then it goes out on 2 separate days. And the biggest issues that we have when it comes to farms that might not work out is when people can't align with a concrete delivery schedule or uphold sort of their end of that bargain, right? So if we say, our warehouse operation team is here on Wednesday from 7 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, but all product needs to be here on Wednesday, and they're like, oh yeah, absolutely not a problem. But then it doesn't come in until Thursday at afternoon, when our delivery trucks have already gone out. Because of the way that our business model works, we only do that one delivery route on Thursdays. It doesn't line up. So when you're not able to actually fulfill the part of what you've said that you're able to do, that's where we've really seen stories be unsuccessful, or when people overpromise but then underdeliver, and they say, we have hundreds of pounds of this, and then Aaron's like, great, and we sell 100 pounds of that, and they show up with 20 or 30, and then we have to do that uncomfortable piece of communicating with all the restaurants that might be planning to run specials or might be planning to do a really cool thing with that product, that like, hey, that cool thing we thought we could get you, we can't. And again, it makes that relationship tough, because if we have to continue to do that, then people are going to be like, well, Freshlist just never has any of the stuff that I order, or that farm always falls through. And we don't want that, because we want us and we want you to be represented, as positively as possible in our communities. And to segue into the positive, we recently had a farm who moved locations. And because this farm had really good brand awareness, and he was subletting land under a different farm name, but everybody knew that it was that farmer. That farmer then was sort of able to still keep their chef communications through us at Freshlist. And now that they're at their own farm, the one that they're setting up for themselves on their own land, we put them back on the list. And now that farmer has their new name, and everybody knows that it's him again. And instead of having to sort of start from scratch, everybody just kind of knows that he's moved location, similar to if a restaurant chef were to leave a restaurant and go to another spot. You're like, oh, great, that food's about to be awesome there. So a success story for us is that, that person needed that time to cultivate their own land. And now that they're able and have that, we're just able to continue to start buying from them again, which is really cool. And the end consumer, the restaurants, still know that person is going to be producing really cool, unique things, and can kind of get excited about that stuff.
I had one thing I wanted to mention to the first thing that Matt said, and kind of going back to the beginning when we mentioned consistency. I think it's valuable for growers to know that, just like Matt said about packing or communicating, certain quality or sizing, things like that, throughout, the season, whether it's zucchini or tomatoes, some of those larger commodities, peaches, whatever it might be, we have the ability to offer and sell, 4 different kind of grades of those single commodities. So whether it's a choice or a number 2 zucchini, or a jumbo, or a really nice fancy or small size, all of them kind of have their own price points and their own markets, but they might all be coming from 1 or 2 growers. As we know, that large zucchini and small zucchini, or wind scarred zucchini, it's all coming from the same plant. but it goes back to the communication of letting us know what you have, what it looks like, keeping the pack consistent and separate in each box is going to allow us to sell all of those sizes and grades rather than just dumping it in a box together and bringing it to us. That's really going to create issues because we have this size difference or grade difference. That's where it's going to be called out when it comes to us. But communication and consistency, we're going to be able to sell it no matter what it looks like, but we have to know, and it has to be packed, together to make that happen.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. And a comment that I would make there is, for those of you out there in the audience and you're listening to Anthony go over things like grading and packaging specifications, and things like seconds, and you're wondering, man, how am I gonna learn all this stuff? I mean, the simple answer is, we have these wonderful folks here because their job is to answer those questions to you. And we've put their contact information in the chat. So if there are things that you are seeking to demystify, these are great people to reach out to, and they will help walk you through that process. And yeah, April, that's a great question. Is there a link to learn the grading system? Yes, exactly. Anthony, could you hold that book up again? That's exactly what I was going to, I have that right here with me too. Understanding wholesale success. Hopefully we can get a link to that in the chat as well. It is, if you want to flip through some of the pages, Anthony.
Yeah, this is the best book from kind of the pack line, the wash line. It has photos of specific grades, what temperature to keep things at. That's really the best book. The title, Wholesale Success. If anybody wants to send me a line, I know we have quite a few copies of these here. If anybody is around Charleston or South Carolina, I could definitely help with getting some of those. I think there's probably an online version of it as well. Geoff and CFSA, I'm sure you all have boxes of that book as well.
I think we might. Don't tell anybody. Too late. Thank you. Perfect. There's a great link for that. And thanks for having the visual ready to go, Anthony. It really is great. It's an encyclopedia. There's lots of pictures, and it's really, really sturdy. The material is really, really sturdy. So I wouldn't recommend it, but I think if you spilled coffee on it, it wouldn't be the end of the world for your investment, because it's big and it's heavy. And as they say in Jurassic Park, if it's heavy, it's expensive. But yeah, these are all great points. And, it kind of makes me recall that, not, you guys aren't necessarily you guys are not the big guy. You guys are not Whole Foods. You guys are not Food Lion. You guys are food hubs. And you exist to respond to unique aspects of your individual markets. So, I'm hearing lots of great things about how you're able to really tap into different opportunities within your markets that farmers may be unaware of. Matt with the arugula pesto, Anthony with talking about, secondhand peaches. Lauren, I know you do the same thing. And because you're, based in two urban centers that have a huge restaurant scene, you're intimately familiar with different restaurateurs who are interested in kind of getting different kinds of unique products. So that's definitely something I wanted to showcase and remind people of, that this is a great opportunity that you have when you're working with food hub managers. But yeah, and we're coming up on we have about 5 minutes left of our 90-minute session, and I definitely want to encourage audience members who haven't had a chance to ask a question, or even if you have more, now is the time. We probably have time for one more in-depth question, and be able to have time for everyone to respond to it. So definitely go ahead. But I obviously have my own questions, and we can proceed in that manner. So I'll just see what happens in the chat, but let's keep it going. So yeah, speaking of restaurants, And Matt, you can speak to the restaurant side in more detail because you do have experience being the head chef of a successful restaurant in a big major urban city in North Carolina. But in general, working with restaurants, how do you guys feel about that? What are some advantages and disadvantages for growers and producers?
I think working with restaurants directly, whether or not you're going to do directly or do it through us with a wholesale buyer, and is really great. I mean, it's great to have that relationship with the chef because, like we've been talking about, that feedback that you're going to get is great. You might be able to know what they do like or don't like about your product, and then when you're the farmer, be able to change that to make it better. I think that there's a lot of benefit to it, but sometimes restaurants can be really difficult to work with because of communication and because of how busy the food service industry can be. So understanding when you can contact somebody, understand how somebody might communicate. One of the things that we've been getting into and recommending people is when they're new, asking them questions like, what's your most preferred communication channel? Do you like a phone call? Is a text message okay? Are you an email person? And then understanding that from the beginning makes it so that you can communicate more effectively. And I think that that's one of the big benefits that we've recently started to do, because for some people, getting a text message, you're going to get a response much faster. But for a restaurant chef who's doing the purchasing, they might be actively on the line, or they might be taking care of whatever millions of things they could be taking care of in the restaurant. So just understanding that response times might vary, and the communication method might be, might depend on who or what that person is that you're dealing with. When it comes to working with restaurants, I mean, it's always very beneficial to understand the style of food that they're doing to make sure that the products that you're trying to recommend to them or to sell to them actually align with what they're doing. When it comes to sort of that commodity stuff, the majority of places are going to be using all of those things. But if you have a niche or a unique item, really making sure that you're bringing it to a place that actually has the potential to purchase it.
Thanks, Matt. And I just do want to take a moment to answer or address April's last question, which is she is located in coastal southeastern North Carolina, I believe about 30 minutes west of Wilmington. And she's asking about food hubs in that region. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is obviously Feast Down East, but if you guys are aware of others in her vicinity, please share that information if you would. But also, if you're unaware, that's okay, because it's more my responsibility to know that than it is yours. So we can also talk more about restaurants in our last couple minutes if you would like.
I can give a piece there. So April, depending on how close you are to the Lumberton Pembroke area, we worked with UNC Pembroke and a local entrepreneur center in the county government to set up a backhaul cooler in Pembroke. So if you're close to that area and you're interested in getting GAP certified or working with FreshPoint, we could work to get your products through that backhaul cooler. We pick up from there Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So you wouldn't have to come up into the Raleigh area. We would just truck it the 2.5 hours north. So if that's an interest, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and I just really quick hopped on Google Maps, and it looks like that cooler is just slightly over an hour from where April's located. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, Lauren, because it is a good example of how these smaller, locally based food hubs are trying to meet the farmers where they are. So I really appreciate you guys doing that. But we are at 11:30. I want to be respectful of our panelists who have so generously offered their time here today. Thanks for that last comment, Mike, and thanks for getting into the chat and asking these guys these great questions. Again, we're very grateful here at CFSA that the three of you were able to be here today. So thank you, Matt, Anthony, and Lauren. You guys are great. Hopefully everyone had an opportunity to copy and paste their contact information from the chat. If you haven't done that, please do so in the next 60 seconds so that we don't lose it. But if you don't, email me. I'm Geoff with a G at carolinafarmstewards.org, and I can put you in touch with these fine folks. So that's all we have for today, folks. Thank you guys so much again, and enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend, and happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Geoff.
Thank you.